I'm your host, Gregory Frye, and my guest today is Dr. Sebastian Marincolo. Even a lot of cannabis lovers have a much more narrow view of how the high can work and how it can be used as a tool. And what are your thoughts on the general perception of the cannabis high and where people are missing a beat here and what's slowing us down?
Well, I think many users didn't get those experiences or many of those that I described because they didn't have access to good material. They didn't have access to good information, which is all like coming from a long prohibition. The prohibition didn't only lead to a situation where most people were underinformed about what they would actually consume. They didn't get information how to consume it. They got bad material, the cannabis that has been bred and sold in the last years on the black market until quite recently, most of it was of a really bad quality. It was meant only to relieve stress. But for instance, I give you an example. If you smoke cannabis at a higher temperature and you have older or aged material, and which is overgrown, has been in the flowering phase for too long, that all gets you more CBN in the system, cannabinol, and that is one of the main culprits for getting a dizzy and getting tiredness, which is fine for some people if you want to get to sleep with it. But if you want to be mentally clear and have like those enhancements that I'm talking about, it's not worth it. So I think the prohibition led to a situation where people didn't get informed about what the high can give to them. And so after a while, they were seeking mostly the effects that were known to them and that they would get from the cannabis that they would get on the bad quality cannabis that they would get on the black market. And which is, being dazed and confused, which is for some people is something they're looking for because they want to shut down, they want to relax. And I do not want to talk down on that too much because for some people it's really, it's helpful to forget about your stress. If you are, you have a joint in the evening and you just get like really fragmented, as I say, you forget about things, but you are in the here and now. But you don't get the enhancements that I'm talking about of, being a better empathic understanding during the high, or, those introspective insights or creativity, because you're too fragmented, and you may that may help you with your stress and to relieve and maybe to sleep. Maybe it also helps you with your pain. But if you want to really get into the enhancements, you have to take a different approach. The subject of cannabis and creativity is one of the most talked about subject, and a lot of you know that there are a lot of people out there who say, wow, that it helped me with my creativity. And a lot of people say, wow, no, it kind of interfered with my creative output. And I'm deeply convinced that both is true. And you understand that only better if you take the central metaphor in my thinking about cannabis is a surfboard. Nobody would expect from a surfboard that you take it and automatically you're going to have blissful experiences going out in the waves. You know that you have to learn something about using a surfboard as a tool. You have to learn how to, you have to keep your balance on it, in which ways to go out where, how to paddle out, etc. So cannabis is just like that. When you look into creative processes, it's not only about the dosing and about taking the right variety of cannabis, the one that suits you, being in the right environment or in the right mood. It's also about the creative process, but also about the right phase you're in. A part of using cannabis, like you're using a surfboard, is to understand in which phase can a cannabis high actually help you to be creative, and where does it interfere, and the various factors that help you in various phases. Let's take writing again. Maybe for me, for instance, in the process of writing, I feel like sometimes I'm having too many ideas. When I'm high, I'm like, and I want to write down things. My brain is everywhere, but I need to concentrate. I need to be slower. Some people can use it. For me, it's more difficult. But so you need to find out, maybe it works for you in the process, in that phase of actually writing down sentences, that you try a lower dosage and you actually focus better, and maybe you come up with great ideas and you get in the flow of writing. Then, but also before you do that, cannabis might help you to do what I call a deep dive in creativity. Like you take a bigger amount and you get really high, where you wouldn't, you would just sit on the sofa. You don't sit in front of your computer anymore, but you get really visual. I mean, I used to be almost tripping, and then you spin out some great ideas. So maybe you have like 1, 2, 3 great ideas for a character, a storyline that you later remember. You just put a short sentence in your diary, sentence you just noted, and you may use that. So as you see, creativity comes in various phases, and different creative activities are completely different. I might use it personally for writing for various phases, the cannabis high, and it might help me. It might also interfere with my creativity in a different phase, like I said, when I'm actually writing. It might help me to spin out ideas, but in the writing phase might not work. Might work again in the editing phase. Who knows? But then, for instance, if I'm also a trumpet player and I want to play a solo on stage, it might not help me at all. Why? Because maybe my timing goes off. Maybe I have great ideas to play a solo, but my timing goes off, and I kind of lose it, or my hand-eye control doesn't work anymore. It's a completely different creative process. So if we look at the mental enhancements and at the whole bouquet of cognitive changes and enhancements that are going on, you need to be able to see how those can be helpful for a certain stage in your respective creative process. If not, it might interfere with your process.
It reminds me of how fine some of these nuances are. For example, on one hand, cannabis can help inspire a greater sense of empathy if the dose is a little off, though, or a little, if you take too much. Instead of empathy, you might get more inflection and focusing more on yourself instead of the other person. Or instead of hyper focus, you might get mind racing.
Yeah.
Which so you and I think it really goes back to the biphasic nature of cannabis, where you have a certain dosage window, and once you exceed it, the cannabis does the opposite of what you want it to do. And obviously, the more regularly you're exceeding it, the deeper you get into the undesired side effects.
Yes, and I think it's important to understand that's a general point I make about altered states of consciousness. Altered states of consciousness are part of who we are. Our brain modulates consciousness itself to fall asleep. What is sleep? Sleep is a trip. Sleep is, a real mental trip, and it does it every night. And we need altered states of consciousness in our lives, and that's part of our nature. Ecstasy, trance states during dance that we induce. I have a 2-year-old daughter. She swirls around. She started to do that when she was 1.5. Observe kids that's one of the first things they're doing to alter their minds, to get that kind of dizziness and to, get in an altered state of mind. But so altered states of consciousness are part of our lives. Very often we don't see it, we don't talk about it, because we reconstruct our nature, our existence from our wakeful state, where we're like trying to understand how it is. But that's who we are. We sleep, we dream, we are in ecstasy, we have orgasms, and they make a lot of the meaning of our lives. But we need to be able to include and integrate those states in our lives. If I have an orgasm while I'm driving on the Autobahn, it's just not a good idea. It's just not. Might be really a bad idea. So that's a very simple, and everybody's like, yeah, it's a very simple point, but that's the same thing with cannabis. You mentioned mind racing. Is mind racing a negative thing? Yeah, well, for some it is, and it might be. I have both. I've had it, and I have mixed feelings about it, because sometimes you feel like, whoa, man, I can't pin down my, I'm running after a train of thoughts and I can't jump on it, so I'm kind of losing everything. But sometimes mind racing leads to a lot of great, to kind of a brainstorm where you end up with an idea that's spot on, interesting. And but mind racing is very often leads to a certain dysfunctionality in your thinking, where you shouldn't be in a certain situation. If you're on the street, if you're walking on the street, or if you're at a party and you're mind racing, you overdose too much, that might not work. It might work for you sitting on the sofa trying to spin out, like what I said, doing a deep dive for a book.
Yeah.